I know. Yeah, I was with my, I got here late and I'm leaving early compared to some of my colleagues. Here for 10 days or however long you're here. Yeah, no, it's good. We had a nice, very productive off-site discussion this morning, and now I feel like there was some really substantive conversations, which we sometimes miss. I'm sure this one will be good. Well, thank you. Welcome. Thank you. I will go on.
I just wanted to make sure you knew where you were. You were here. Let me show you. So there are 3 sets of panels. The first is on co-benefits, second on finance, third on enabling environmental policies. So this is the third segment. And then the speaker right before you will be who's the guy next door to you. I know. And then this is and then we'll have Q&A after all the comments. Yes, and there'll be a lot. There's a lot of speakers. And so this, I don't know, they told me you guys are okay. So I am not I am not asking you a question. I'm just going to turn it over to you because I just need to. So if you want to prep your remark, this is what I feel like. Thank you. And I can see you and yeah.
I mean, maybe just the ones with the name on them, obviously, but.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Please feel free to join the inner table if you'd like. We're going to get started in 2 minutes. Great. Good afternoon.
everyone. Welcome to the Marrakesh Partnership Breakthrough Lab session on resilient and adaptive food systems. This session has been co-organized by FAO, the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, Boston Consulting Group, the CGIAR System, the World Economic Forum, and WWF. My name is Melissa Ho. I am the Senior Vice President for Freshwater and Food with WWF US, based in Washington, D.C., and it's my distinct pleasure to be the moderator for this session this afternoon. We know that food systems are at the critical intersection between achieving our shared goals on climate, nature, and people. It has been amazing to see the reception on this very first food day ever at a climate COP and the fabulous set of discussions that have been happening not just today, but really throughout the 2 weeks and across all sorts of pavilions and sectors. The discussions are important and they're a major success and milestone, and to be even having them is a success and milestone. But I will note that at this minute, there's still a need to see the core NIVEA process move forward and to really ensure that food systems transformation stays on the climate agenda with member states and with urgency of action. So we talk so much about agriculture's role in mitigation, but we know that climate change is a growing threat to achieving food security, which has been felt around the world, really with unprecedented heat waves, droughts, floods, and fires. All of this happening against the backdrop of continued disruptions from COVID, global wars and conflicts, and trade. And we know that poor and indigenous youth and smallholders are especially vulnerable, and especially women. And we also know that they're critical to driving systems change and the solutions that we need to see. So we must advance urgently action to achieve resilient and adaptive food systems. So to ground our discussion today, I want to reiterate the key targets for food systems associated with the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda and the Global 2030 Adaptation Outcomes coming from the Marrakesh process. There are 3. So number 1, climate resilient sustainable agriculture increases yields by 17% and reduces farm level greenhouse gas emissions by 21% without the expansion of new lands and while improving smallholder farmer livelihoods. Number 2, private sector integrates physical climate risks into investment decisions and continues to innovate mechanisms for financing adaptation and resilience to enable the mobilization of 140 to 300 billion US dollars needed by 2030 across public and private sources. Number 3, universal access to tools and information required to integrate climate risks into decision-making are strengthened from the local to global levels. So today's session will seek to answer this key question to advance those 3 targets. How do we ensure the strong political commitment to strengthen agricultural resilience and upscale adaptation to climate change, especially strengthening the capacity and resilience of those most at risk? We have an amazing, so this session will introduce innovative approaches. We will have 3 sessions broken out. The first will really feature co-benefits to climate action, really looking at biodiversity and nature impacts, but also impacts on communities. The second session will be looking at what and how we can look at innovative financing approaches to make sure financing really reaches those on the ground. And the third set of sessions will focus on innovative policy approaches to strengthen the enabling environment. So we have an amazing lineup of speakers representing producers, agribusinesses, financial institutions, government, researchers, and civil society. So with that, let me thank everyone for joining today. And we have an opening video from the Ban Ki-moon Center to welcome us to the session.
Dear guests, I'm honored to welcome you to our COP27 side event, Implementation Lab on Resilient and Adaptive Food Systems, with our dear partners CGIAR, FAO, Boston Consulting Group, the World Economic Forum, and WWF International. It is promising to see many events during and on the margins of COP27, addressing the increasingly urgent issues of adaptation to climate change. We all celebrated the landmark Glasgow Climate Pact at COP26, which included the objective to double adaptation finance by 2025. Building on this foundation laid by the UK government in November 2021, this year, under the leadership of the Egyptian presidency of COP27, adaptation continues to further integrate into discussions and negotiations. I must underline that adaptation also forms a pivotal part of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which was adopted by 196 state parties under my role as United Nations Secretary General in 2015. Now, almost a decade later, progress has been significantly lacking. Our joint efforts, discussions, and consultations around adaptation are becoming more and more essential as more lives are being directly affected by the impacts of climate change. Agriculture plays a key role within the agenda of climate change adaptation, and it is extremely vulnerable to irregular weather patterns. Farmers in the global south, particularly smallholders who produce about a third of the world's food, are seriously struggling with the lost harvests and livestock. If we really want to tackle the climate crisis, we need to address the entire value chain of our food systems. This means going beyond trees, land use, and productivity. It means that we need to put people at the center of our conversations and efforts. Supporting smallholder farmers is needed now more than ever to address the growing populations, the increase in demand for food, and to make food systems sustainable and resilient. Currently, smallholders only receive 1.7% of total climate finance. The Global Center on Adaptation, which I co-chair, estimates that investing $1.8 trillion in adaptation will save more than $7.1 trillion in climate costs. A significant increase in public grant financing towards building resilient and adaptive food systems would offer strong returns on investment, address socio-economic issues, reduce emissions, protect biodiversity, and make considerable progress towards combating the climate crisis. Targeted investments in research, breakthrough innovation, policy approaches, transformative production practices, and financing models will be the solution to many of the challenges we currently face. I hope the discussions today will help to identify the opportunities to create and sustain inclusive, resilient, and adaptive food systems. I count on all of us to increase the ambition for climate action. Thank you.
Wow, powerful words. So for those just joining, welcome. Again, we are breaking up our session into 3 sets of discussions, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Our first panel will really focus on practices, not theories and models. We had a lot of that in our previous session, which was really inspiring about the sense of urgency and what we need to do. and the possibilities. But this first session is really going to be grounded in real-life examples of where and how adaptive practices to climate change really yield co-benefits to nature and people. So our first speaker, Helmi Abulesh, is the CEO of Sechem, which is an incredible model here in Egypt, not just regenerating agriculture, but really landscapes and communities. And Helmi will share a little bit about the work they've been doing over several decades, as well as their vision for bringing it to the world. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really sorry for those who were here in the last session, and I hope I don't replicate myself too much. But what I can say is my father started 45 years ago, 1977, being an Egyptian living in Austria to have a dream to go into the desert, establish there a community based on biodynamic agriculture where people can live, learn, and work together and produce environmentally and socially sound products, unfold their potential, and live in a respecting, dignified community. So this wonderful picture, 1977, out of Austria for Egypt, was somehow considered a sunstroke or something my father had, because it's a mission impossible in all regards, specifically as he spoke about economy of love being the supply chain management system, and Egypt being the target for these biodynamic products, the Egyptian market. And Egypt, up till now, has no market for Demeter or big market for organic products. So this is the starting point, and after 40 years, the result was that hundreds of farmers all over Egypt grow biodynamic products. 2,000 people live in the Sechem community, work together in the Sechem community with 30,000 people around, and produce food, pharmaceuticals, and garments, having a school, a hospital, and a university for thousands of kids and students, and basically being in every home in Egypt, supplying millions of Egyptians with herbal teas and other products. So this is the first part of the story, and obviously the question still is why and how did it come about. And because of time, I will just jump to what's the outlook of this. This model, which seemed to work for many, many reasons, I'm happy to share in one-to-one or other meetings. But this model was, in the end, a lighthouse in the desert, and when we were not able to see it as a model upscaling to all of 7 million Egyptian farmers and 1.6 million Egyptian teachers and 600,000 academicians and 3 million, it didn't, even if everyone came and was very, very happy, but we were not able to upscale. Main reason was that the raw materials are still more expensive, and then it kills everything, because in Europe, organic markets are 4 to 8%, in Egypt, less than 1. So, including some of these ecosystem services regarding biodiversity, water, and climate seemed to us the only possibility to upscale. And this is when we made our CO2 assessments and found out that our farmers sequester 10 to 20 tons per acre of CO2 equivalent carbon in soil, trees, and other things, whereas Egypt's average is 5 tons emission per acre. And this is now the range of opportunity and ambition of climate-friendly farming between conventional and biodynamic. But to make it happen, it needed an agricultural carbon credit market, so to honor and pay to these farmers a price for ecosystem services. And this is what we did, and what we intend to upscale to 40,000 in the next 2-3 years, and to 250,000 in 3 years' time. And it works and is funded by itself, by the service, no donation, no anything. It needs capacity building, funding, governance systems for agricultural carbon credits, and a market for agricultural carbon credits, but then it could be a lever for system change for the agricultural system in Egypt, and contributing with 50% reduction of Egypt's CO2 emissions.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's a really powerful to see a vision implemented through community vision, and then now the innovations you are bringing, including really cutting-edge carbon market opportunities, and then achieving impact at scale. Thank you so much. So our second speaker, William Kwende, is the founder of Sirius Shea, based in Burkina Faso, West Africa more broadly. Sirius Shea is an economically viable, socially inclusive, environmentally sustainable company with the purpose of transforming the shea butter industry and regenerating the shea parklands in Burkina Faso. And he will speak to us about an integrated landscape management approach and how to really ensure that benefits and income flows of production and processing of this product really returns to smallholder farmers, especially women. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Melissa. So, I am the founder of Sirius Shea, an eco-entrepreneur. I left my UN career about 10 years ago to focus on bringing the technologies for the community in West Africa. I'm from Burkina Faso, Benin, and Ivory Coast, so I don't forget anyone. And basically what we have done is to develop a zero carbon and deforestation-free processing platform for the community, so that you can put anywhere, bring your crops, mostly non-timber forestry product. So we are talking about shea, baobab, balanitis, and other trees from the Sahel, and process them. That includes also mangoes and other vegetables. We did that because we saw that the losses post-harvest was incredible. In some areas, more than 90%. So the first thing we had to do was to bring the technology to be able to process this and recapture this amount of food that was lost, condition it, and bring it to the market. Local market, regional market, and international market. So our platform has been selected, and I will thank the World Economic Forum as a top innovator. And I presented in Davos the perspective that we have. So beyond setting up the platform, we have a blockchain-based data collaboration platform with the big companies that are buying this ingredient. A lot of people may not know, but in West Africa, we produce about 15 million women produce 1 million tons of shea, and 90% of it is going to chocolate. So without shea, it will be very, very difficult to have a production of chocolate like we have today. So next things we do is that this platform also provides information on traceability and the other regulatory needs to the big companies like Bunge, Nestle, and all the potential consumers, because we are talking about a lot of products. And doing that, we also provide them an electronic access to the wholesale market. So I was saying 15 million women organized in cooperatives are doing the work for shea. There are the other value chains. We haven't started working with them yet, but we're going to start now in Senegal. And they are organized in cooperatives, and we basically produce a georeference database of these cooperatives to determine where we set up this platform. So we estimate that the Great Green Wall on the Sahel side can produce over $50 billion worth of foodstuff from these trees every year. 10 millions of organic fertilizers, because we are now entering a crisis in fertilizers. Many countries are trying to supply fertilizers for their farmers, and they can't because the prices have tripled. So the government can't bear the cost of providing fertilizers, and our platform can provide fertilizers and soil conditioners and biochar. And all of this gives you the scale of the opportunities for ecopreneurs, right, in our region. So really, we are trying to brew a social network of entrepreneurs to connect to our operating system in order to accelerate the scaling of this resilient and sustainable agriculture in the Sahel.
Wow, thank you, William. Three things I just wanted to pull out of yours really was The introduction of technologies, post-harvest processing especially, to reap the value back to the producers. Really, the professionalization of data systems and traceability to give confidence of sourcing and practices, and then reaching markets as well. I love this idea of ecopreneurs, and I can't wait to source my sustainably sourced Burkina Faso shea in the marketplace soon. So thank you so much. It's a really great model for other ecopreneurs in the region. So we're going to zoom out now. Yes, thank you. Yeah, really fantastic. So we're zooming out now to a global corporate perspective with Facundo Echeverri, who's the Global Vice President of Public Affairs of Danone, a major dairy company. Over to you. Thanks.
Hello. Well, first of all, I want to say that adaptive and resilient systems are starting with adaptive big companies as well. We need to reinvent the way we see our value chain. And there is a huge opportunity changing the perspective. And that is the best breakthrough that I can share with you. Understanding that there is a big opportunity to localize our sourcing, not compromising anything. Integrating the local community first, people-centric approach, communities that are eager to share learnings and developing themselves through integration. Also, integrating technologies that are preserving the business at the core, all the technological aspects that are about the yield, about quality, productivity, but also integrating in the equation by design the environmental aspects. It's not about just producing milk in Nigeria, in Morocco, in Egypt. It's about doing this in a comprehensive way, doing regenerative agriculture, integrating people at the center of the regeneration, as was explained before. And this is the meaningful thing, because we are building a sustainable, true sustainable supply chain through this. We are creating an inclusive supply chain. Just examples. Here in Egypt, we have developed 20% of our sourcing of milk is through 8,000 farmers. 7,000 of that are women, are all small, are all fostering the same sustainable practices. So we can do at a scale the adaptation, but we need to localize the solutions and reaching the right profiles of farmers that are engaged in the process to be transformed and to be sustainable. One issue, and I will try to wrap up with this, is about the risk associated to this transition. And it's through different perspectives. Through the big company perspective, we need to understand the complexity to go down in the value chain, to go local, and for that we have a huge opportunity to partner with a lot of actors. And that is the real breakthrough about our ability to open the dialogue with local authorities, with local NGOs, with association of farmers, with different entities and other companies in the same area to unleash the potential. So first is that about the risk in the operation from a company perspective on how we go local. But from the farmer perspective, also we need to understand the concerns about the market access, and we need to reassure them for clear relationship established with us, with the company that is buying what they are producing. So we are helping them to produce, to be our suppliers. And to be our suppliers, we need them to do it well. Otherwise, imagine if we translate that without any help, we are going to increase our total carbon footprint in Africa because of not taking into account the need to transfer the technology to do it in a way that is fitting with also with the climate ambition. So these are some learnings. I'm happy to exchange later more.
Thank you. Thank you, Facundo. I love the theme that even though you're a global multinational company, you really put people and producers at the center, and then really thinking about that risk element for you as a company in your sourcing, but also thinking about what that risk looks like for those producers. So I really, again, want to just do a round of applause for this group. I think the themes, whether you are looking down to, into the ground or up reaching markets around this systems approach and really making the connections and empowering producers to scale these practices. Really different examples. Thank you so much. So we will reserve questions until the end and move on to our second segment, where we're really focusing on unlocking climate finance and really looking at how to make sure that finance, which already is paltry for agriculture, frankly, climate finance, less than 3% is going to the ag sector. So we are raising attention about driving more investment into this sector. But this session is really looking about how to ensure that finance reaches producers to get adoption of practices. So our first speaker in this segment will be Suzanne van Tilburg, who is the Global Head of Food and Agri Networks at Rabobank. And Rabobank is a major cooperative bank based in the Netherlands, focusing on ag financing. Over to you, Suzanne. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa, and thank you all for being here. I think actually this is one of the topics high on the agenda, and you see it back in many, many different ways. But what I do miss actually is kind of a movement in which you do see more finance stakeholders, because it's a wonderful compliment that we as Rabobank hardly can keep up with all the requests to speak in these sessions, but we need a movement. So my first plea to all of you would be, please take along your own financial stakeholders and banks to COP28, so that next time we will have an active financial discussion into really boosting finance for these kind of stakeholder groups. So having said that, why are smallholder farmers interesting for Rabobank? It's not because they are the most commercial yet, it's not because they are the easiest ones to finance, but they do play such an active role in the climate mitigation, and they do it from a business perspective. And that is the beauty of it, because we have decided, once we started to work with farmers in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, that we needed an ecosystem approach. An approach in which we are bringing them together. We build cooperatives, we unlock the inputs and all the supply materials that they need so that they can have that easy access, but also it's easier through the ecosystem approach to digitize and to really come up with solutions that are tailor-made for these specific target groups. A few examples, and I think maybe for the questions we can deep dive a little bit better into it, but a few examples I do not want to deny is that we've brought in a team of 4 whiz kids to COP27. 4 nerds that are really into digitization and love being active with GPS monitoring of agro trees, fruit trees for small-scale farmers in Africa, sequestering carbon. And they have a beautiful business model because they can sell the carbon credits, and actually have had that auction on carbon credits specifically for small-scale farmers in Africa last week, which reached over 30 euros a ton, which is in Africa really a paradigm shift. But this is not enough. We need to do this with many more people. So we have SECAM, in which we team up. We team up with Solidaridad and with many others. And I think this is an implementation lab. It would be really awesome if we can indeed call on those financial sectors to be also together with us in unlocking that finance or innovative models for small-scale farmers specifically. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Suzanne. Data and finance and unlocking that and directing it to agriculture for good. Thanks so much. So our next speaker will join us virtually in a pre-recorded statement. Let me just do a quick introduction. Fadila Chomba is the Secretary General at African Business Angel Network. The African Business Angel Network works to increase the pool of investors who support and fund promising entrepreneurs in Africa, and also really working to support the infrastructure. They have a goal of targeting investment of 100 million and at least 500 startups to create over 10,000 jobs in Africa. So it's broader than agriculture, but Fadila will speak to us about how we can... Oh, are you on the line? Wonderful. How fun. Great you can join us. We were told the internet connection was tough. But please speak to us about how private finance and business can unlock resilient and adapted food systems impacts. Thanks so much. Over to you, Fadila. Was that-
Good morning, leaders of the agricultural sector and food systems. I would like to thank the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, Boston Consulting Group, SIGARD, World Economic Forum, and WWF International. It is a real honor to share a bit of my conviction about unlocking financing for resilient and adaptive food system, and I will focus on the role early stage investors are playing. Well, my name is Fadila Chumba. I am the Secretary General of the African Business Angel Network. ABAN is a Pan-African network of business angel group, and to date, ABAN has 60 accredited angel group across 34 African countries and in the diaspora. Last year, ABAN Angel Network invested approximately $400 million in innovative solutions across various sectors, including agri-tech and clean technology. This year, we launched Africa's first climate smart agriculture angel investor network. This new cross-border network consists of individual investors who have the financial means, the skills, the risk appetite, and are eager to support entrepreneurs in climate adaptation and resilient food system value chain. And through this new network, we are pulling angel capital into a special purpose vehicle. This capital is in turn invested into innovative, resilient, and adaptive solutions across Africa. The early stage investment made by this new network is actually setting up the foundation under which VCs will come on board to provide follow-up round fundings to these ventures. Well, just to give you an example of how critical angel investors are in this sector. Souk Farm, a sustainable farming company incorporated in 2019 in Rwanda, received the initial capital from angel investors to materialize the concept. This year, Souk Farm is a post-revenue company valued at $15 million, and they are working on expanding the food product offering. There are examples of companies across Africa, just like Souk Farm, that were able to get off the ground because of the initial angel investment. And there are many more innovative ventures on the continent that are in need of angel investment to actually get off the ground. Well, angel investors are critical for a well-functioning, resilient, and adaptive food system sector. And many entrepreneurs in this sector need capital to support the early stage businesses. We must note that even the relatively more mature ecosystem, such as Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya, still don't have enough pre-seed stage funding sources. And in addition to capital, entrepreneurs that are building resilient and adaptive food system solutions also need mentorship, professional skills, and access to market to help them build scalable and sustainable ventures. This is where angel investors have a significant role to play, as they are actively involved in the development of the investee company, which differentiate them from other funding sources. Well, research have shown that funders who receive mentorship and support are more likely to build businesses that create more jobs, revenues, and impact. We need to attract, train more angel investors so that they can start investing into these new ventures. But as we continue to work with existing angel investors towards our commitment to create a much needed initial capital for entrepreneurs with innovative solution in food system value chain, I hope to see a much more energizing business environment where policymakers can cater for activities such as angel investing, as it has a very critical role to play into building a resilient and adaptive food system sector. To end, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, all angel investors who are investing in climate resilient and adaptive food system, and other stakeholders who are making the business environment a lot more enabling. Thank you very much.
Wow. I think the piece around mentorship and support of ecopreneurs was important, but even maybe more important is really disrupting the model of how impact investing and angel investing is done. So critical to bring in this capital, but thinking of what new models of investment look like and how to support and structure how the financing flows to support real impact is going to be really interesting as ABIN moves forward. So our last speaker in this set of talks is Katrin Harvey, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, which really engages and empowers youth, leaders, academia, international organizations, and civil society to promote global citizen values and global citizenship education. And she's going to speak to us about unlocking finance, especially for women. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Yes, we've been talking about finance and how to reach the most vulnerable. And if we're looking at the smallholder farmers, we are aware that many of them are women. And then especially when we're looking at Africa, the finance gap, so the access to finance gap for women is extremely wide. It's the widest of the world. But how can we challenge that? How can we do better? There's a couple of points where we can work and we can improve our processes and systems. And the first one would be just to be a bit more aware and do better needs assessments and what is actually needed for smallholder farmer women, including the size of financing. So it's usually not the huge amount of money that we need. It needs to be direct, and it has to have a certain flexibility in the repayments. Once we know what they need, we must also make sure that when we develop programs and projects, including policies, that women are represented in the decision-making process. That means developing programs that will work for women and are decided with the women in mind, but also going all the way through to monitoring, evaluation, and learning to make sure that we do better, even better afterwards, and be included in policy making to make sure that the kind of investment that comes from private sector does it in an enabling environment that actually works for them. And on a side note, this also includes making sure that women are at these events like the COP and that the family photo of global leaders includes more than 4 women. We need to also ensure women have the capacity to handle finance investments. That includes not only the smallholder farmers or the recipients of the funds, but also those who hand out the financing. So the finance institutions need certain gender-specific training and capacity building, as well as the smaller women's organizations who are usually the ones on the ground working directly with the farmers and distributing most of these, especially the grant funds. Overall, we know that especially when it comes to climate adaptation, there's not enough finance going around. We didn't reach our goal of the 100 billion annual climate finance as it is, and then going towards adaptation, we're nowhere close to a 50-50 split between adaptation and mitigation. And out of that, only a tiny, tiny percentage actually ends up with the smallholder farmers. So we really have to increase the financial commitments, especially in grant funding from the donor countries. And then lastly, once we do have this finance, We have to start, or at least the commitments to the finance, and I think this is something that has been going a bit better this year with the COP, is we have to be better in being transparent of the financial flows and making sure that it is actually additional and not a recycled fund. We have to hold our governments and our stakeholders and leaders accountable for those commitments and the financial pledges that they're making. That includes things like regulations, audits, and to a certain degree, even quotas for women to make sure that we're still, again, the women get the funding that are in part of the decision making. So that's a very brief overview of how we think we could maybe get more money to the women on the ground.
Thank you. I think the transparency and accountability, so it needs to be new resources, not repackaged, and prioritizing women, but I think the other really key point you mentioned, not just having women have access, but be capacitated to receive and use the resources. Thank you very much. So that is the end of our second session, our second set of speakers on the financing piece. We're going to move now to the third set of speakers, really focusing on the enabling environment for unlocking resilient and adaptive food systems. And this is broadly defined as regulatory structures, governing structures and institutions, as well as public policies and programs that really need to work in coordination with private sector as well. So with that, let me start with our first set. We've got, four speakers in this section. One of them will be virtual to talk about the policy enabling environment. Our first speaker is Omar Abdoulaye Ba, the General Director of Reforestation and the Great Green Wall Agency based in Senegal. And I will let Omar speak about the Great Green Wall, but it was a huge feature and a real celebrated accomplishment of several country initiative and many multilateral partners at the UNCCD COP in May in Abidjan. And so really excited to hear him speak about this initiative. Over to you, Omar.
Thank you, Elisa. First of all, we get to make sure we understand the Great Green Wall, not as a beautiful line, a good-looking line of trees. It's a resilient system that needs to be built. When we talk about green wall, without making really sure that the green wall is about the resilient food system, we're completely out of the line. That's need to be understood. Right now, when you look at all the policies across the 11 countries that implement the Great Green Wall, there is no cross-the-line food system resilience policy at all. And most of the time, we can refer to the sectorial policies in agriculture, in water and energy. And those policies sometimes are not really in line with good practices. We have to say that. I'll give you an example. All of the water wells that we use at the Green Wall right now are using generators and gas. So we're polluting the same environment we're trying to rebuild. And at the same time, we're destroying the small vegetable gardens that the brave ladies that have on the ground. So the policy is not really lying. Number one. Number two, there is no way you can make a green wall without water. And right now, it's not a priority. And you can't have access to water if you don't have good energy policies. The line, the green wall line, come across you. It's really ran around 2 months a year, with 100 millimeters, 100 to 200, 250 millimeters maximum. So you really have to dig in about 100 to 200, 300 meters to get the first drop of water. How can you do that without technology? How can you operate technology without having energy? So it's really the food system depend on our policies, but it's depend also on the technologies we invest on the ground. The Senegalese government had really put in what we call the integrated model. It's a model of interconnected projects that help to achieve the Great Green Wall that we're talking about. And it's important to understand that local family businesses, individually businesses, most of the time 80% are women. They the one that live in the green wall. They the one that actually exploiting the chain of values. The government has put in an agency that finances those people. Because if you do not provide a proper finance to these people, the small businesses comes in, they'll take it all. And when they take it all, you kill your economy and you kill the revenue from those people who live at the Green World Initiative. And they're the ones that support the food system. So it's really important to finance those very own people that live at the Green Wall Initiative. So we put in 60 billion of our local currency to finance those people. 80% of them are women. Number one, the intermediary, which are the private small companies, we put in our financing system through FONGIP. It's a guarantee, it's a loan guarantee system that help them out. But you cannot also do those two sets of guarantee without guaranteeing the bank also that loan their own money. So we put in a bank at the government level that guarantee the bank that guarantee the loan. So it's really a three-layer system that can help to guarantee the delivery of the food system. But what I'm putting out there is 6 different things that need to be done. Without it, you have nothing. Food forest, firewood service plots, agriculture farming and pastoral farm, renewable energy for the water wells, vegetable garden, and forage crop. If you don't have it, you most likely may get something, but you're not going to get the resilient food system that you're expecting. Thank you.
Wow. The points I really just want to elevate there are that this idea that the Great Green Wall, which people visualize as a physical Great Green Wall of trees, I loved how you really said it's much more about this resilient food system and really what the impacts of that restored landscape is going to do for the people. It's not just this, we're going to plant a bunch of trees. So really appreciate that. And then I also, the piece around, the only other one I really will elevate, you shared so much, was around how you have to make sure the sectoral policies are aligned, and that's not always the case, and that you could really be working at cross purposes, that you have good intentions and a goal. How do you do that and cross-cut and coordinate across a government around a shared agenda, among other things? Thank you so much. So our next speaker in this set is Juan Lucas Restrepo, who's the Global Director of Partnerships and Advocacy at the CGIAR. He's also the Director General of the Alliance for Biodiversity and NCIAT, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, and he's a good friend of WWF's. Let me turn it over to him.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Melissa, and we are indeed good friends, and it's great to be here with many friends in this great conversation. And I would like to follow on the conversation. We're talking about how do we bring impact at scale, and I want to share a short experience on the current thinking of CGIAR, which, as most of you know, is a group of 12 international organizations working on agricultural research for development, where we're working together to respond in a more integrated fashion to this climate crisis and food crisis and societal challenges. And basically what we see is that we've been focusing for decades in developing new technologies, new solutions, new innovations, but we have not done enough in bundling them and packaging them, and not only our knowledge, but those of our partners and others. So we really reach the ground and land on the ground with comprehensive ways of working with farmers, acknowledging their capacities and knowledge for change. So this bundling, this packaging of innovations is one element. And the second one is that, of course, as we just heard, for uptake and enabling environment, the right policies are what we need. So the example I want to share is with this program. It's been running for 1.5 years and already reached 1 million farmers in Africa, in 6 countries: Senegal, Mali, Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Zambia. It's called ICRA, Accelerating Impacts of CGIAR Climate Research for Africa. It's a World Bank funded project of $60 million. That's precisely doing this. It's working on bringing and identifying a number of those CSA, climate smart agriculture innovations that some of them have been developed long time ago, bundling them, coupling them with climate information services, and very importantly, partnering with the regional and the national organizations that at the end of the day will take the weight on their shoulders to move things forward in a sustainable manner. So sub-regional organizations such as CORAF or the national public institutes that deal with forecasting, weather forecasting, etc. They are our critical partners to help reach in a systematic and hopefully sustainable way all of these farmers. And of course, this can only have a limited reach, so we need to see how that can be scaled up, and this is why ICRA also worked for a significant amount of time with the African Union, and we were very happy to see Commissioner Sacco and the African leaders approve a climate change and resilient development strategy action for Africa that is, of course, an amazing political commitment, but that is relying on knowledge, on the networks, and a lot of information and capacity we were able to bring in as inputs through this very important political process. So now, hopefully, with a better enabling environment, we'll not be talking about 1 million, but maybe a few billion farmers, and then we will see the change we need. Thanks.
Thanks, Juan Lucas, for the research perspective. And I think the CG system is known often for the breeding varieties and the technology, but I'm going to take a seed analogy. And what I heard you say is that you can have a silver bullet seed, if you will, but unless you plant it in the ground and create enabling environment and all the other components that seed needs to grow and be disseminated, and the partners to help tend and water the seed and take the products of the plant out, you won't be able to reap the benefits of that seed. Thank you so much, and congratulations on that amazing program and the award. So our next speaker is Carla Mena Soto, the National Director of Agricultural Extension and the Climate Negotiator at the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock in Costa Rica. And thank you so much. I know you have a busy negotiating schedule, so we're so thrilled you're here to share some thoughts with us on policy.
You hear? Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. It was a pleasure to have here and share views and experience and lessons in order to promote our food system transformation that is so important in that century. So it's a big challenge also for us. So Costa Rica has the opportunity to have regional initiatives participating, for example, in PLACA and also in negotiators projects, and also here in the COP27 to be part of that team. So based on this international, regional, and national experience, I would like to share with you key factors to enable food system transformation in my country. The basic principle is the effective participation of the interest parties. That is so important. Thanks to this, government actors, so public actors, academy, that is so important, research and professors, productive areas too. And we establish a dialogue and work based on agreements. This has allowed strengthened collaborative governance frameworks to develop public policy of greater practical value. That is so important for us in order to move resources, to move good practices, to move the different sectors that we have in our country. In agriculture, our most important sector, coffee, livestock, sugarcane, and rice and bananas are really a good sector for us, and it's so important in our economic development. In addition, this a robust academy in the country that we already have it, that contributes to generate technical and scientific information, data, research projects, to strengthen the process of change. Because with that direct link between public, private, and academy, we can make assistant or technical assistant to our producers, that the end are the so important issue in that topic. So like a Minister of Agriculture and working in the extension service, this is the key, how to work with them. So for that reason, key factors at the end to transform the food system in my country are public policy, directly to support our policy in our ministry, to work with producers, and of course to work with the different sectors that I mentioned to you, which involves private sector. Another thing, key factor, is participation of the public, private, and academy. This is key. It's a key issue. Governance, how to identify needs, conditions, and at the end, financial support that we needed. So technical and scientific information available. They make research in the academy, how to obtain that information, and also with our research institutions that already have it in the public sector. And really important to say, international cooperation. Of course, for us, it's so important in order to implement the different projects and strategies while we develop in the food system transformation in our country, especially with that 5 areas. But of course, we are a tropical country, so we offer many options, especially from the producers. That is the key. This is the way to work. I invite all of you to work, since the different organizations you are, to work with the producers. This is the key in order to transform with good practices, involved in the decisions that we need to take it. That is so important. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And appreciate putting producers at the center as a common theme across all of these different sets of talks. And I really want to just say the idea you mentioned as your key factors, working across sectors, public-private partnership was a real big theme.
Yes.
Governance.
Yes.
As well as the technical and science information, so partnership with academia and
Yes.
research. And then I want to pull out, you mentioned international cooperation, but PLACA, you mentioned the regional initiative you have in Latin America is elevating a regional approach that any one country may not elevate your standing in a place like COP27, but that's a really important
Yes.
platform as well.
Yes, and something really important to say, in our region, Central American regions, now we are working together with that initiatives in order to work like a team with the authorities from the Ministry of Agriculture. So that is so important for PLACA and for negotiations too. How work with the Ministries of Agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our last speaker in this section is Dr. Dao Te An, the Vice President of the Vietnamese Academy of Agricultural Science, who will be speaking to us about what it takes to develop strategies and transform food systems in Vietnam. And I believe he's not going to be on a recording, or no, is he online? Dr. Dao is online, is that correct? Yes, he's joining us online.
Sorry, is that
Thank you.
something happened?
Thank you to
You want
the organizer to invite us for the speaking in this very important event of 27 and focus on how policy can contribute to the transformation of food system. So as you know that Vietnam is an agricultural exporter country with smallholder-based agriculture. So under the climate change, we are still facing a lot of challenge on the malnutrition and also negative impact of climate change, high food loss and food waste, etc. And particularly in some remote area, in mountainous area or ethnic minority area. So we observe that maybe the main reason is that in Vietnam we have firstly we have different policy program for agriculture, for health and nutrition, but in general the intervention is separately. The lack of coordination, policy coordination across sector, and also we have a lot of initiatives from different research institutes like our academy, or from some from CGIAR like CIRAT from France, etc. But mostly at a small scale. So we the initiative of Ministry of Agriculture is to develop a national action plan for food system transformation it's more transparency, responsiveness, and sustainability to 2030. So the objective of the policy action plan is to have a better coordination amongst different disciplinary policy program, the agricultural development program, health and nutrition, and market access, etc. And also we have established, in order to realize this initiative, we have established a technical group with the involvement of CGIA center such as SIAT, IRI, INRI, also CIRAT from France, different NGO, and public research institute like our academy. So we provide the technical assistance for the ministry, and we can also the contribution of a different NGO. So the approach of public, PPP, public and private partnership is very important, and we hope that with the National Policy Action Plan, we can realize initiatives for climate change adaptation, promoting of agroecological practices or CSA practices at the large scale and mostly focused in the difficulty area with the objective that how to improve the resilience of the vulnerability group such as women and any minority household. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dao, for joining us. There are a lot of themes that were similar, I believe, from Costa Rica, and I appreciate this idea of aligning cross-cutting policy, nutrition, market access, in order to develop this national policy action plan and adaptation plan for agriculture in Vietnam. So thank you so much, as well as the partnership with research, and also calling out the CG system as a key partner, as well as civil society. So thank you again, Dr. Dao. So that concludes our third set of presentations. We have an intervention now that we will hear from BCG, Chris Mitchell, who's a managing director and partner at the Boston Consulting Group, who will speak about a recent report really highlighting key intervention areas for food systems, and then we'll move into Q&A after that. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. If we could go to the next slide. So today we're going to be launching work that was done with the high-level champions to determine the 4 Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation outcomes for food and agriculture. One of these overlaps, Melissa, with what you shared earlier in terms of climate resilient, sustainable agricultural practices increasing yields by 17% and reducing farm-level greenhouse gas emissions by 21% without an expansion of the agricultural frontier. The second is focused on food loss and waste, aiming to halve the amount of production lost and per capita food waste relative to 2019. And finally, ensuring that healthy alternative proteins capture 15% of the global meat and seafood market. The last is that we will be able to increase the global consumption of plant-based foods, particularly fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and legumes. And all of these are aimed by 2030. Now, I think we would all agree there are lots of reports and there are lots of targets. And so rather than just, again, reiterating what has already been agreed, we tried on the following slide to show what is the canvas of the food system. If we could move, Liva, the slides ahead. It's so important to understand how complicated the food system is, how many drivers there are, and all of the different stakeholders that are involved from production through to processing to distribution and consumption. And of course, the many different impacts that are achieved, whether those are environmental, nutritional, social, or economic. And so the goal of this work was to really take the great examples that we've heard over today and be able to map them onto this picture of a full food system. And on the following page, Liva, you see what those actions are. What's so encouraging is how many of these have been represented in the conversation so far. We heard from the CG system the importance of taking R&D, making sure that it doesn't stay in the lab, but is actually bundled and packaged in a way in which it can reach farmers. We heard from Rabobank about farmers needing credit in order to shift the way in which they are using their land, have access to water, which, as was mentioned earlier by our friends with the Great Green Wall, a need for energy. We've absolutely heard about the importance of value addition in processing. Sirius Shea recognizing that we cannot maintain the colonial structures of exporting raw ingredients that have all of the value addition done in places where they don't grow those products. The absurdity of Swiss chocolate and Belgian chocolate when they have no access to cocoa other than from West Africa. And we recognize the need to make investments in infrastructure, particularly in the Global South, in distribution, in cold storage, in bulking, so that we can have greater efficiency and quality control. And one that I think is not spoken about enough, which is marketing. The large food companies, which mostly focus on producing foods that are saturated in fats and sugars and salts, too much so, also have the benefit of vast marketing budgets. We need to ensure that there is far more pressure on food companies to align their marketing dollars to be spent on planetary healthy options, and ensure that we have labeling that gives consumers insights not only into the nutritional benefits of the products, but also into their full environmental footprint. So our hope is that this work will allow all of those who are practitioners to see how they're contributing to and need to work in a collaborative way across the food system with so many stakeholders, much like the panels that we've been hearing from today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Now we're actually going to move into a discussion and have it be, I won't say informal, but Q&A, facilitated Q&A with any of the speakers that we've heard from. We've got some guiding questions to ground the conversation, but we can first open it up if there are questions specifically for the speakers, and then definitely please read the questions and we can move into a real discussion about what it will take to implement and drive action in an accelerated and urgent manner to get the vision that we've heard today. So let me open the floor to questions. Well, maybe I'll pose a question myself then to the panelists first. And I would say, what in your mind, based on the other speakers you've heard, what is needed and how do we put together this, what I'm hearing is a producer-centric focus, a systems approach, and then really driving partnerships? Was there something on the other speakers that sparked something new or different that you want to make a connection with in the work you are already doing? So to any of our speakers.
Yeah, I think I'll take it.
Yes, William, thank you.
Yes, I think there is not one thing, there's many things. And this has to do with financing all those initiatives. So I'm thinking about Rabobank initiatives to unlock carbon finance for every basically farmer, which basically project or work has the potential to generate such carbon credit. I think that's a powerful link, you know, because we are working with communities right? And it can become some form of operating system because, as Mr. Bao was saying, it's this unit, this producer primary entity, which needs to have access to finance, to knowledge, to technology. And these links can create some form of operating system. You see, if you think about the social network, how they're scaling, right? If you think about a different model of bringing in finance to this primary entity who was the producer. So we're going a little bit deeper than the groups that we're working with, but we can go to I'll say the really primary building block of the resilient food supply chains, which is the producer, and being able to unlock finance, knowledge, technologies for this building block. So I think I'm very curious of how this can be implemented, because if you look at it, this is how you can scale up. Look at how all the social networks have scaled up. If you build a system around it, an open system, where every one of them can connect, you will cut all the red tape that today is creating problem to access what they need basically to thrive.
Thank you. Suzanne.
Yes, of course, I have to reply to this positive message. Thank you so much for bringing this under the attention. I think you're absolutely right. And why this call to the banks and to the other finance institutes or the foundations of the world? Because actually we do lack a few key enablers to get to scale. And from a bank's perspective, this is not only about finance, it's also about policy. Because if, for instance, you want to gain carbon credits for small-scale farmers, we still have a lot of obstacles in place, such as double counting, triple counting. We all know about this. The second one is the fact that there's still no definition of an impact investment framework. Who defines what's impact? Who defines when a small scaler gets impact? There's no globally harmonized framework for that. A third obstacle that we obviously see is that in some countries, nature is being considered a kind of a government right. So there are countries in which small-scale farmers are not even allowed to create a business model by using nature, which in itself is logic, historically speaking, but it's not of these days anymore. We need to change that in order to really get to scale. And last but not least, I mentioned Acorn indeed. We have 35,000 farmers now. We've sold 30,000 tons of carbon credits. They do have this beautiful value of over 30 euros, which is a lot in Africa. But we would love to build a restructuring fund in which we can reach 2.5 million small-scale farmers. And in order to do so, we do need some blended finance as well. So this is a call to all the MDBs that are present and the governments to also look at these type of solutions. And if at COP28 also we will be able to bring those together to really target public-private connections and blended finance models, I think we can make a huge difference, because these indeed are the game changers of this world. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the call for what to look ahead for at COP28. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you. When we talk about food system transformation, we already talk about soil too, about trees, about different environment and around a farm, how to produce our producers. So it's so important with like ministers or authorities of agriculture in our countries, if we have extension services, think about what exactly our producers need in order to produce. Good practices, which ones, what kind of good practices they need to implement. So for that reason is the extension service in our ministries of agriculture, It's like okay, this is, to give examples, is this coffee or is it rice? The good practices are different. Fertilizers or management plan or different, soil, fertilizers. Even the agriculture is nature, but we already have attack of disease, for example, or different conditions. Sometimes, for example, hurricanes. How to resolve the problems with the producers have, problems with the environmental disasters, for example. How we are preparing our extension service technicals in order to support if something happen with the plantation of coffee or rice or another kind will multiply, crops, and according with the conditions. This is the way to think and transform. What kind of agricultural, sustainable, or conditions or or soils and climate, water they have it. The climates are so different in our countries. How to produce with good practices. Which are the good practices they need to implement with that conditions, with that soil, with that resources that they have in the farm. So for that reason, extension service needs to think about technical or good practices and technology. But that technology also for us, like a public sector, a big challenge is how to write the right proposal in the technical way to obtain international cooperation or even national budget too, in order to align our national budget or international cooperation with that topic, in order to transform in the same line, since producer until policymaker decision in the national plan. So this is the key issue to how our authorities, our politicians know about the needs of the different technical aspects that we need to transform the food systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. Over to colleague Fiona.
Thank you.
Question.
Thank you. I'm Fiona Napier from the Climate Champions team in Nairobi, based in Africa. I have a question for Rob Cameron of Nestle and also Facundo Teixeira of Danone. So you represent very large food businesses in the world, and congratulations on your announce today around increasing your percentage to 50, doubling it from last year of what you will source from regenerative agriculture. My question, though, builds a little bit on William Quende's question around finance. So I want to come to the role of food businesses, multinational food businesses. What can you do to make sure you source more product from African or Africa-based food businesses, such as shea products, such as Sekem's products, for example, rather than bringing in product from overseas? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question around local sourcing. I think one of the unusual things about Nestle is that although we're global, and a lot of people assume, therefore, that we just kind of operate in very global ways, actually we operate in markets in some 168 countries. And what that means is that a lot of our manufacturing is done with ingredients that are sourced reasonably locally, and that is generally speaking the case. It's not always the case, but it's generally the case. What we want to do, and we have been doing, if you take, picking up on the examples of food waste, Golden Morn is a porridge well known in sub-Saharan Africa. We're using cassava byproduct to reduce the waste there, to create a new version of that that's affordable, that's nutrient enhanced, micronutrient enhanced. That's one immediate example that springs to mind of where we're not only making products available with locally sourced ingredients, we're making it more affordable and we're making it more nutritious. So that's the kind of thing we can do. Now you may say to me, and I would if I was in your shoes, well done, but that's one example. Can you do more of it? And the answer is probably yes, we can. Increasingly we want to be doing that because when it comes down to it, if the world today, we're facing huge problems of affordability. We've done over the last 5 or so years, micronutrient fortification has been a very important part of the work that we do in Africa. 800 billion servings or something like that. It's an insane amount of impact that we've had there. Can we do more? I'm sure we can. As we're thinking about regenerative practices, and I said in the panel previously, one of the key components of regenerative principles has to be it's local. You know, it's local by its definition. How could it be anything but local? Because local context is everything. So I can imagine there being more, but you know, in general, the principle is that's what we want to do. So yeah, we'll aim to do that.
Thanks for the question. In fact, given the nature of our portfolio, 80% of our volumes in general worldwide are produced and consumed in the places that we have the inputs and the output is the consumption. But regardless of this, we change the way we source within the countries. In Mexico, for example, after 5 years of work hard with farmers, we integrated 20% of our sourcing in 500 suppliers, small farmers. That takes time. So the question here is how we could accelerate this, working with local authorities. In some markets, we can change our footprint. Maybe it's not about changing the location, it's more about changing the mix and being more inclusive in our value chain. Opportunities we have in all the countries, and this is being worked.
Can I ask our colleague from Nestle one thing? Introduce yourself. I know you were on the previous panel, but for this room, since you weren't on our...
Big pardon, should have said, and I know Fiona from many years. My name is Rob Cameron. I'm the Global Head of Public Affairs and ESG Engagement at Nestle.
Thank you.
And while we're on Africa, I'm also a former Chief Executive of Fair Trade International, working directly with smallholder farmers, and I think I share Fiona's passion for supporting smallholder farmers everywhere, but particularly in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you. And a nuance, since I had 2 WWF colleagues that were on the last session, which shared the session with you, is that I think there was a idea that regenerative agriculture principles should be harmonized, and we should align on what we mean by that, so that we have rules of the road of best practices. We're not comparing apples to oranges, and we don't all get a common definition, but that absolutely implementation is determined at the local level and should be tailored and fine-tuned to the people and the landscapes on the ground. I think that's what you meant, but I just wanted to add the WWF perspective on that.
I do want to make this point because I think it's super, super important. We haven't got the time to wait, because for us, if we don't get going with full-scale deployment of regenerative practices in agriculture, we fall too far behind. So we have to move fast. So we've done some definitions on our terms, but what I wouldn't want anybody to think is, oh yeah, here we go, it's corporates co-opting regenerative agriculture. We have to get started, we have to act. So we have to go fast, and we also need to go slow. It takes time to consult farmers. It takes time to draw in indigenous peoples and their views. And we heard earlier on today, fascinating from South America, about forest dwellers protecting the forests. We need time to listen to those voices. So move fast, move slow, then bring it together.
Yes.
I think that's how we have to do it.
Yes, great, thank you. And I want to turn it to Juan Lucas Restrepo and then to Helmi.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on this particular point that I think is critical, and I'm going to do this more from a personal perspective coming from my past, and I want to follow up what Carla said. Hello, Carla, on the other side of the room, around the extensionist. Because I think the extensionist, and now that I moved to make a parallel example to Europe, now I live in Europe for the past 3 years, there are family doctors. And the family doctors is your first source that you go to when you have an issue, when you have a problem. And I was with the Minister of Agriculture of Colombia a few weeks back, and she asked, why doesn't all of the knowledge of AgroSavvy and SIAT, and you are so many people with so many solutions, why aren't they uptaken by the farmers? And I thought, well, dear Minister, because the missing link is that the extension service has been lost. And if you don't have that systematic, permanent service, as a public service. It can be privately funded, etc., but it has a public function because it's not representing any specific interest, and it's the first person the family relies on for accessing new knowledge, for changing, for taking risks, for changing. Without that last mile support there, institutional support there, it's going to be very difficult. Of course, extension services tend to be very costly, so we need the power of digital. We need to make sure that over time we combine a much higher reach, ensuring that the power of digital extension is there, but never missing the opportunity for a farmer to reach out to another human, to discuss issues, and to make decisions. I think that's critical.
Thank you, Juan Lucas. Helmi, would you like to make an intervention? And then I think we'll close after this one, unless there's anything.
Only summarizing once more what I think is needed to upscale the model we have developed in Egypt and we have presented. And it's the one thing we need: funding, combined funding and development support for farmers for this 1 to 1.5 years to start up the agricultural carbon credit job. And this can be all returned in money, so because it's viable. So it could be financial tools, it could be development money, but we need a lot of money if we want to reach this 3.5 gigatons we are speaking about. We are speaking about millions of farmers, and millions of farmers need to get a support for 1.5 years to start off this trip. Second, we need to agree on a minimum line for these different standards of agricultural carbon credits, because at the moment there's a huge segregation and everyone is wrong and right and everyone is fighting, and in the end this is all going on the account of the farmers, because there are small differences on models of modeling or GIS or analysis or I don't know what, and because of this nothing is moving. So we need to agree on a minimum standard which can be used and where people can use. And last but not least, the market. And yes, in Egypt we are very proud. Dr. Mahmoud has helped to set up a voluntary carbon market platform, but we need the demand. And if last year the voluntary carbon market was 1 to 200 million tons, we need 3.5 gigatons of demand. So we need to make sure that there are commitments, because when Egypt comes in and other African countries and all the world comes in, somebody has to buy. Otherwise, we are just distorting the market again and misleading the farmers.
So thank you so much, Helmi. I am not going to summarize all of the themes. They've been the common themes throughout all 3 sessions. Instead, I really want to turn it over. We're so privileged to have Mahmoud Mohadin, who's the high-level... Oh, Katrin, did you want to make an intervention first? I'm sorry. Please, let Katrin make the last intervention.
Mama was trying to help me get your attention. Thank you. So I'm going to make it very short. I was listening to the discussions and the conversations, and just a little teaser, because we're going to speak about this at our official side event on Monday afternoon. Over the course of the summer, we engaged with young agri-champions, so youth from Africa, and they came up with a demand paper where they had 4 specific demands for world leaders on how to improve their situation and how to help farmers become more sustainable. And so 2 of them actually reflect quite specifically what came up today. One of them is farmer-led capacity building. So we've heard this already today, where we know that farmers trust farmers the most. And so there was, one of the demands is like really help farmers train their equals in terms of more climate-smart agricultural practices. And then secondly, something that came up from the lady from Costa Rica, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, is some more innovative and adaptable and needs-based insurance schemes that include upfront payments so that they don't have to lose all their money before they get the insurance payments, but actually have some sort of prepayment if we know that the hurricane is coming, that they can save and they can protect themselves. So just like a little bit of a different component that we're going to talk about more on Monday afternoon at the Ban Ki-moon Center side event. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrin. Appreciate, I will just highlight that one theme around farmer-centric, I think has really been a key theme here. So let me now turn it over to Dr. Mohideen, who's the high-level champion from Egypt, for closing remarks.
Right, thank you so much. I think many people are celebrating the fact that we're taking now agriculture, food systems, and water more seriously than before in this COP. I'm quoting some of the veterans for COPs and conferences like these for many years. But I think the more important matter now is basically trying to see some sort of actionable measures. Happy with your three main areas of discussion, and try to address them super fast given the time. But in the meeting that we just had now, in addressing the initiative called AIM, attended by the Minister of Agriculture from Egypt and the US, and the Minister of Climate from the UAE. So there is Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. So this is possibly answering one of the main challenges, which is basic about science, role of research and development, and the minister the secretary from the US mentioned a couple of initiatives to support work on science and sharing knowledge in this area of work on agriculture and food system. Then Egypt came with the idea of having the FAST initiative. So you have the AIM initiative and the FAST initiative, the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation, to complement some of the areas on work when it comes to technical assistance and finance, and linking that all to the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, which has food security and agricultural systems as the first area of impact and impact assessment when it comes to agriculture. But what is missing? It's still the three main challenges outlined in different areas of work on climate action: adequate finance or funding for research and development, adequate finance when it comes to implementation in the field, and then we have something that is not addressed, but basically the smart person who put the questions about what are the challenges. I would say the issues related to behavioral change in order to support the work at leaders level and at the business level, and of course in society. So, and all at the end would boil down perhaps to finance and capacity. So how can we get this? Because we are required now in our work and the champions in addressing the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda to see how that is going to be operationalized, how that is going to be projectized, not just to talk about it. And we need to have monthly update, perhaps for our ambitions, and or to deserve this impressive title called champions to support the work. So one area of work on finance, I think you just mentioned areas, Helmi just mentioned the carbon credit market. This is with potential, but we need to make sure that the whole ecosystem on the demand supply side are in place, and then we'll keep pushing. But even if it is working fast, that will not really be complementing the or bridging the gaps on funding. So we need to talk about areas of finance from business sector, from the specialized banks, and we had yesterday some good discussions about some leading banks in this area. But still, some of the major work comes from public sources, or required to be from public sources, including research and development, because the impact of research and development for it to be commercialized, it takes quite some time. So two proposals here. One is basically what we're trying to do when it comes to support for the agricultural sector from budgets through some SDG-based budgeting and sustainability budgeting. The other one, which could be faster, because budget, as we know, especially in developing economies and emerging markets, are under severe constraints. So we put a proposal that all funding related to resilience and climate action, and your work here in agricultural food system is simply qualified under that, not just for low-income countries, but for middle-income countries, need to benefit from IDA-based funding. This is finance with grace period of 7 to 10 years, possibly. In some areas of work, we can do that. Interest rate 1.5 to 2%. You pay back in 20 plus years. The beauty of this proposal that's already in existence, but it's only for low-income countries at limited scale. So we need to scale it up, and you push it for low-income countries further. So what's new? What's new is to extend the work to low middle-income countries as well, because African countries are not low-income countries anymore. And I was surprised in some discussions with some leaders and representatives not from Africa. They still assume that Africa is low-income countries. But as mentioned by the South African president, that even the middle-income countries could be considered as vulnerable low-income countries because of the standard deviation around the averages. By average, we look good, but when it comes to discrepancies and inequality, we need really to have this support. So I need your voice with us, because it's all about finance at the end of the day. Yes, private sector can do what it can, at least to finance its business. It can borrow commercial in some areas of work identified here, but the serious gaps, we need 10 times the funding required now for agriculture and food systems based in the recent work by WRI and others. So one area, either to extend the finance based on either terms to low middle income countries. In this case, you would be covering the whole African continent with the exception of one or two countries. One is high income and the other one is high middle income. So perhaps they can do market access better than the others. And the other thing that came to me from a colleague who worked with me for many years, he said in some, because we're not just talking about the World Bank, we're talking about the specialized funds and the other regional development banks. So if you cannot really do that because of some governance constraints, he is proposing to complement my proposal. His name is Chris Thomas, who worked with me, as I said, for many years. So we can really have something like rebating part of the interest for green projects, including climate and food. So this is like money back on your credit cards if you are subject to one of these packages. But we're talking about much more serious fund than that. So I would say you need to push for the funding based on either terms. And my argument for those from MDBs, if you have something better to beat IDA, please let me know, and we'll push for it as well. That would be nice to have. Good thing about IDA, it doesn't just come with finance. It's coming with what is more complicated than finance, with data systems, technical assistance, capacity development, and good monitoring and evaluation when it comes to your point, Susan, about impact assessment, because that comes with independent impact assessment of IDA work. So let's see if that works, because we need to make some good push on this. But I need your voice through your governments who are representing you at the boards of the likes of the World Bank and the regional development banks, especially if your countries are among the G7, the G20, because they have bigger share, not necessarily bigger influence, but let me assume that in democracy we are all equal, but bigger share means something when you push for more finance, because they will have some budgetary implications on this. Having said that, I'm very grateful to your work, and we see the potential of the agricultural sector when we are building the pipeline of projects for investable opportunities, but this could be another discussion that I'll be having later on today. But this is a great day on agriculture, food adaptation, and how can we push the action further in the work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, that's a whole other set of sessions to really pick up a lot of the ideas you're bringing to the table about new funding mechanisms and models and how to really open those up, the IDA funding. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and really for also your work on the champions. As I close the session, I know we're over time. I think there's two things. One, I just wanted to thank everyone, and especially the work of the High-Level Champions Group and the partners that put this session together, but more importantly, that put this ambitious agenda together, and the work of BCG in setting these really clear goals and targets to advance. And I think, again, we really want to celebrate this moment here at COP in elevating food on the climate agenda. And then as you have your meal tonight, eat your food, drink your drinks, take a moment to take in a lot of the work that's left to be done and the innovations in impact investing, in ecopreneurship, in blended finance mechanisms, in multilateral financing mechanisms, how to unlock those and think about what those goals at COP28 should be. So thank you again for joining today, and have a great rest of Food Day at COP.